The summer I turned 19, my best friend Jared invited me to spend a week at his family's lake house in northern Minnesota, a secluded, gorgeous old cabin that had been in his family for decades, surrounded by dense woods and sitting right on the edge of a deep, glassy lake that locals just called Blackwater, supposedly because no one had ever reached the bottom. It sounded like the perfect getaway. Fishing, beers, late-night bonfires, and no parents, just us and a few other friends. 6 of us in total, but from the first night I felt something off about the place, like it was watching us or listening, maybe both. The air was thick with insects and fog, and the silence at night was unnerving, not peaceful but stifling, like the trees were holding their breath. On the second night, while swimming after dark, one of the girls, Leah, said she felt something brush against her foot. At first we laughed it off, thinking it was seaweed or a fish, but then she screamed and scrambled back to the dock with a deep gash down her calf. None of us saw what happened, but she was shaken and refused to go near the water again. The next night we dared each other to swim across the lake under the full moon, and stupidly, I agreed to do it alone. Halfway across, the water beneath me went still, unnaturally still, and I felt it. A tug on my ankle, then another, harder. I thrashed, panicked, and managed to break free, swimming back as fast as I could. I told everyone I hit a branch, but I knew it wasn't. That same night, we heard a knock at the door around 2 a.m., even though we were miles from the nearest house. Jared answered it before we could stop him, but there was no one there. Just wet footprints leading down the steps toward the woods. We followed them with flashlights and found nothing. But when we came back, the front door was wide open again, and inside, written in wet handprints on the hallway wall, were the words, "They never left." The next morning, Jared's cousin Nate was missing. We searched the woods, the shoreline, even dove into the lake, but it was like he vanished into thin air. That evening, we contacted the local authorities, but the sheriff only shook his head grimly and said, "Blackwater takes what it wants." No one's ever found Nate's body. Jared sold the lake house the following year. I still have dreams about that night, about something reaching from the black water, eyes glowing just below the surface, waiting. In the summer before my senior year of high school, I worked as a helper on a farm in rural Nebraska, mostly for the paycheck and the chance to be out in the sun instead of stuck indoors. The farm itself was massive, hundreds of acres of cornfields. That stretched far enough to touch the sky. And the owner, old Mr. Cole, was a hard man but fair, though he always warned us kids never to wander out too far after sundown. "There's things in the field that don't want you there at night," he'd say with a crooked smile, but we figured it was just one of those weird old man scare tactics to keep us close. That changed the night I stayed late to finish some irrigation work, and found myself alone in the center of the maze-like rows just as the sun disappeared. The corn swayed around me with no breeze, and a strange static seemed to buzz in the air like a presence waiting just beyond the stalks. I started walking back toward the barn, but everything looked the same, rows of green on green, and I realized with mounting fear that I was lost. I tried to stay calm, used my flashlight, followed the furrows, but the deeper I went, the more disoriented I became, and then I heard it. A slow, steady crunching of dry leaves behind me, too deliberate to be the wind. I turned, expecting to see one of the other workers messing with me, but there was nothing. I moved faster, nearly jogging, but the footsteps stayed with me, always a few paces behind. I ducked down between the stalks, killed the flashlight and listened, and that's when I saw it. Something tall and lanky walking down the row, moving in unnatural jerks, its head twitching side to side as though sniffing the air. It was wearing a long, tattered duster and an old straw hat that looked almost like part of its body. And even from the distance I could see its face, or lack of one. Just blank, pale skin stretched tight like cloth, no eyes, no mouth. I froze. It stopped. I don't know how long we stayed like that, minutes, maybe longer. But when I dared to move again, it sprinted after me, its limbs flailing like broken twigs. I ran until I hit the fence, climbed it, tore open my palms on the wire, and collapsed near the barn. Mr. Cole found me hours later, half conscious and mumbling. When I described what I saw, his expression changed, and he said only, You saw the Watcher. He's been here longer than me, longer than corn's been growing. You just don't meet him twice. I never went back to that field again, and to this day, when I see a cornfield in the summer heat, I swear I feel eyes on me. That summer was the hottest on record. Unrelenting sun, heat shimmering off the pavement. Night so suffocating it felt like the air was trying to choke you. I had just moved into an old duplex in a small southern town for a summer internship. Grateful for the cheap rent even if the building was ancient. Its air conditioning barely functioning, and the walls so thin I could hear every creak, every whisper from next door. The neighbor was a recluse, someone I only glimpsed once or twice through the blinds. An old man who never answered the door and had food delivered weekly. But one week, the deliveries sat untouched. The heat got worse. I started smelling something, foul from the shared wall, a sweet rotting stench that seeped into my clothes, and after 2 days, I finally called the landlord. He said he'd check it out. The next night I woke around 3 a.m. to the sound of footsteps, slow dragging, on the stairs outside. I assumed it was the landlord, but when I looked through the peephole, no one was there. I opened the door and found a dead crow on the welcome mat, its wings twisted like it had been crushed mid-flight. I should have left then, but I didn't. That night, the power went out. The air grew still and oppressive, and in the dark, I heard something from the shared wall, a knocking, rhythmic, then what sounded like nails dragging downward. I tried to sleep, drenched in sweat, but I kept waking to whispers from the vent, voices repeating my name, getting louder every hour. When the power returned in the morning, the landlord called, voice trembling, and told me the neighbor had dead at least a week ago. They found him in a chair, skin melted to the fabric, but here's the thing. The room was covered in writing, carved into the walls, the floor, the furniture. Just one sentence over and over again, he's in the heat. After that, the temperature in my apartment never dropped below 90, even at night. The AC worked, but the air came out warm, and when I looked at the vents, I saw eyes, just for a moment reflecting like glass. I left that apartment before July ended. The landlord told me no one will stay in that unit for more than a few weeks. They all complain about the heat, the whispers, the scratching. Something died in that room and something else stayed behind, feeding off the suffocating, endless summer.